Hello. I think we're live. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties. Um, yeah, welcome to our live Q&A about Annie and, well, mostly Annie, also Grinnell.
Yeah,
Oh,
welcome
geez.
to our.
There goes the technical difficulties again.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are trying to focus this Q&A a little bit about, I guess we initially were concerned that this Q&A would be sort of about why Annie would have disappeared, but now I guess the focus is more why Annie managed to come back. So this first clip we're going to display is giving us some context about why we felt kind of pretty sure that Annie had disappeared, because we hadn't seen her for a long time, but also we had started seeing a lot more new falcons around. And for a while, Grinnell was trying to defend the territory from the other falcons, but here you can see Grinnell is actually displaying to this new falcon who is in brown juvenile plumage, so this bird's about a year old. And that's when we started to feel really concerned about Annie's whereabouts.
Yeah, and I think, there's a lot of nuance going into our kind of decision to, say that we thought she was missing. Part of it was seeing Grinnell's behavior and seeing a lot of juvenile or other female falcons around. And then a lot of it is that it's really not common at all for female falcons to leave a territory after they've established it and successfully bred there, especially right at the start of the breeding season. So that's why we kind of sent out that message last Monday that we thought Annie was gone. And very happy that we got to rescind that message on Tuesday.
Yeah, and in that clip there, the juvenile, after doing some courtship behavior with Grinnell, just jumped down into the nest box. Does this footage show her in the nest box
no,
as well?
The next footage will show the scrape.
Okay.
Her at the nest box.
Okay, but yeah, see, so there's that juvenile female looking at the nest box and Grinnell being very receptive to the juvenile bird. And if Grinnell thought that Annie was around, he himself would not have started courting a new female. So we have a couple little questions. So this is a bit of a question for locals, but it's kind of irrelevant. Oh my goodness. Your little clicker is terrible.
My clicker's broken.
Anyways, so we mentioned that Annie hunts near downtown Berkeley, but what about where does Grinnell hunt? And so the Claremont Tennis Club is actually where Grinnell was found when he was injured.
Mm-hmm.
So he was, apparently his territorial dispute with another falcon must have taken place somewhere near the Claremont Tennis Club. So, yeah, if you've seen falcons overhead there, it very likely could have been Grinnell.
We also know that he does a lot of hunting down by the water, down by the bay. Where the watermelons grow. He has brought back a lot of water birds to Annie, including red-winged blackbirds, a black-necked stilt,
coots, regularly coots.
So we know that he hunts down by the bay as well.
All right, and so, there's Grinnell really, really bowing down to that female. That is an indication that he was interested in that bird. But the question, have we continued to see the interloper since Annie's return? And luckily we have not. Since Annie came back, we have not seen any falcons other than herself and Grinnell. Then we have the question, how do they know when their partner is gone forever? And that's, they don't know for sure, but Grinnell definitely would have known that Annie is not present on the territory. if you've ever been somewhere within earshot of a falcon when they do their really loud call, you can hear it from a very, very long distance, and they can hear it even better. So Grinnell had vocalized to Annie, and she, must not have shown up, and Annie wasn't present to try to defend the tower from these other females. So, but of course, like when Grinnell got injured and Annie started courting a new male, Annie had every reason to believe that Grinnell was dead because he had been taken into rehab.
And with these birds, a lot of people like to say they mate for life, or they're monogamous. But really, when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, there's a drive to try to reproduce every year, and you don't want to miss a year if your partner is gone. So there is a lot of pressure to court a new partner, even if your previous mate, disappeared like a couple days ago. So there's a bit of pressure to kind of quickly transition to a new potential mate if one shows up.
Yeah. So this question here, could another falcon pair nest at Cal? So in addition to Annie and Grinnell, how much territory do they need? With all the other females, are there other suitable nest sites in Oakland or Berkeley? And so the answer is probably another falcon pair would not be able to nest at Cal, given how well Annie and Grinnell typically are defending the territory. But there are several suitable places in and around Cal that are high enough ledges. There's quite a bit of food. It is not impossible that another pair of falcons could move in downtown Berkeley. There are other falcons in and around Berkeley and Oakland, and I know of some in like Richmond.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch all over the Bay Area. So there are other suitable sites for birds, and maybe it would be interesting to do an initiative to add nest boxes to some other locations. How much territory they need is kind of a good question. With animals generally, the answer to that is really dependent on how much food resources they have. If there's plenty of food, there can be more individuals present. They don't need to defend as much of the territory. I do know there is, for example, a situation in Minneapolis where there are 2 peregrine falcons nesting on the same building on the opposite sides of a building. So that can happen, but
it's relatively rare.
Not typical.
Most literature has a kind of exclusion zone that a falcon has for their territory is about a mile, but it varies, and the shape of the territory isn't like a perfect circle around a central point. So there could be a territory that starts, like Annie and Grinnell's territory could start at the Campanile and go down into Berkeley, and another territory could start really nearby and go up into the hills.
Yeah. So will Annie lay eggs per her usual schedule? And so the last couple years, Annie has laid eggs, I think, on the same day, March 10th.
Yeah.
That being said, we do not know what she's going to be doing this year. I mean, between Grinnell disappearing in the winter and then her being missing for a while, other birds looking at and considering the nest box instead of her, that could really change the timing of breeding. We'll kind of just have to wait to find out. But yeah, we'll see. So someone just wanted to, can you explain nest scrapes? So as you can see on the footage right there, the juvenile is in the nest box. And so the word nest is being used very loosely. Peregrines really just lay their eggs on bare rock or gravel on cliff faces, or in this case, on a building. And so the scrape, it refers to just falcons will create a little depression as best they can, clear out a little space for the eggs to be laid in. And so it refers to the little depression that they'll try to make, and also the behavior where they will get down kind of on their belly and kick out a little area behind them.
So is Annie banded? I see Grinnell is banded. Annie is not banded. We first saw Annie in 2016, winter of 2016. So like December, and she was a full adult plumage at that point. So we know that she was at least 2 at that point. So we think she's, at bare minimum, we know she's 8 right now. But we don't know where she came from or any other information about kind of her history, unfortunately. The local group who bans peregrines in the Bay Area is the Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research Group. They do really amazing work, and they try to ban any nest they can get to, but there are some nests that are inaccessible, like some that are on bridges, maybe a few other kind of structures that are not climbable by a person. And then there's some nests that are really far out there in kind of natural areas that are just unknown. And we know they're producing offspring because we see them, but we don't know where the nest is.
Yeah. Well, there is actually a big question with falcon biology, which is just regarding juvenile dispersal. We don't really know how far juvenile birds will go to find a new nest. So for all we know, Annie's from like the Intermountain West or something, or Oregon. We really can't say. Flying 1,000 miles is not difficult when you're a peregrine falcon, although looking for a new home very far away might be difficult. But circling back about Annie's bans, so without her being banded, it leaves a lot of questions, but we do not need the ban for us to identify Annie on camera. Although it's subtle, Annie is actually a pretty distinctive bird in her coloration and patterning, so we're able to recognize if a bird is Annie or not. And this is especially the case. The bird you saw, the juvenile that Grinnell was getting interested in, was clearly in the first year plumage, which is brown and streaky. So we knew for sure that that was very much not Annie.
Oh, I think I accidentally clicked one. We'll answer that question.
There we go.
What are the theories as to where Annie had disappeared to? Man, there are a lot of theories. There's a few silly ones. I think I like the that she went to visit her daughter or her son, that we know where they are. But really, once a offspring move off a territory, parents and offspring really never meet up again. I like the baby moon one. Yes, that she was just
essentially Annie was just
getting her talons done.
But for the real answer to the question, we don't know, but hypotheses include one, she was disturbed by kind of the significant drone activity that was around and left for a period of time. Another is that with several different competing female falcons nearby, that she decided to not risk a confrontation with multiple other females at the same time. Kind of one of our primary falcon watchers on the ground who keeps an eye on them from below has been hypothesizing that maybe Annie has another male or another location she's been considering nesting as well.
Yeah, there's only been a little bit of research on extra pair paternity in falcons. and none of the research has been on peregrine falcons, but other species, it's all been pretty low rates, between 0 and 10% extra pair paternity. So it's unlikely. For the most part, they are monogamous, but it's possible that she could be seeing another male on the side. Um, we unfortunately, this is one of those things where we just aren't probably ever going to know exactly where she was and what she was up to. We are still really hoping that she will nest here at the Camp Neely, but maybe she is setting up another nest site somewhere else, or with another male. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll find out. Luckily, we have seen Annie in the nest box now twice since she returned and has done that scraping behavior we mentioned, kind of trying to clear a nice spot for eggs. So this question, does that bowing behavior we saw have to mean interest? Since Grinnell is smaller, doesn't he have to just be submissive to any larger female either way? And it is true that a female falcon is a threat to a male falcon, since the males are quite a bit smaller. But if Grinnell was not interested in this female falcon, he'd very likely not confront her at all. Now, the bowing is in part a little bit of a submissive behavior and signals some deference to this female he is interested in. But, so he is showing a level of submissiveness and a level of, placating the female with that particular movement and gesture.
That said, though, people on the ground did report seeing him chase off the juvenile female at least once. So, he was at least once acting aggressive towards her. I think she got a little too close to him. He decided that he didn't like that too much.
Yeah. Let's see. So we mentioned there's a lot of obstacles downtown where Annie hunts. Does she hunt near ground level, intercepting pigeons, or higher up? And so falcons, their hunting strategy is to dive from very high up onto a flying bird. And so they're aiming for birds that are already flying pretty high up because they cannot break fast enough in their usual hunting dive if they are aiming for prey that's too low. So she is quite a bit above ground level when she hunts most of the time, presumably. Rarely do falcons do more of a lower vertical chase. Let's see, how do we... Grinnell has been very nesty. Do we think that's a result of all the interlopers or Annie's absence or both? Or is he just becoming a pipe and slippers guy?
Grinnell's behavior this year has been a little bit mystifying to me. Usually by this time of year, we've seen him bring prey deliveries to Annie, and we have not seen that this year. It could have happened off camera. I'm not going to say that he is just not doing that at all, but I'm not sure why he's behaving quite the way he is. I still think Annie is interested in him. I mean, she certainly is doing head bow displays, and she's not acting aggressively towards him at all. And he does seem, sometimes when he was with the interlopers, he would just sit next to them for hours at a time, but that might be more about getting used to the new bird than anything else. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Grinnell's behavior has been relatively consistent with what he does this time of year, other than the fact he's not been seen on camera bringing a prey item to a female, which is the role of a male and something that they do before initiating nesting, but we don't know if that's happening on camera. So this is a really good question. So that year-old female, would she have been old enough to mate and lay eggs? And
biologically, yes, she is old enough. That is relatively rare, though. When you have a year-old bird, they can breed, but it's really, really uncommon. And often when they do, they don't succeed. They don't quite have everything figured out in regards to incubation and where to lay eggs and how to time hunting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the limitations for a young bird laying eggs is not so much in that first year. It's not really a physical limitation so much as a lack of experience as a falcon. Um, all right. So can we tell if Annie is eggman is the word I've been hearing? Can we tell if Annie is eggman yet? And
So bird egg fertilization happens very fast, and egg development happens very fast. So she actually doesn't need that much time to kind of grow the egg inside her and cover it with its shell and everything. And birds also can store sperm prior to fertilizing the egg. So it's a little hard to say. Like she probably likely has her eggs developing inside of her. That often starts quite a ways before laying. The ovaries become larger and start to produce eggs. But and she very likely has the sperm needed to fertilize any eggs that she has. But it's probably, given the timing of when we expect eggs, given previous years, she hasn't fertilized them yet, and they're not in like the final stages of shelling the egg.
yeah, although we can say we are seeing some visible signs that Annie is getting ready to lay eggs. It's a little bit subtle, but you can see she's developing what's called a brood patch. Uh, Falcons, both the male and female, do this. They'll lose the downy feathers underneath their outside body feathers. So if you get Annie in the right angle, you can see that there's like kind of a crease between the two sides of the breast feathers. And that is telltale that she's lost a bunch of the downy feathers under there. And that brood patch develops so while incubating, there can be skin on egg contact between between the falcon and the eggs to keep them warm during incubation. So although she might not technically, be developing the egg in moments from laying, she is showing, the physiological changes that indicate egg laying is pretty soon.
Just a little bit of a side fun fact about kind of bird reproductive biology. One of the things about birds is that they really try to minimize their mass to improve the kind of efficiency of flight. And so one of the things that they do is that when they're not using their reproductive organs, they shrink substantially. Like a male's testes in the non-breeding season are tiny, like the size of a grain of sand. And then they enlarge when the breeding season comes along. And they actually need to use them. So just a little bit of bird fun fact about bird reproductive biology.
Okay, so how much do the falcons need to eat per day? Does it vary with season? And, on average, a small prey item like blackbird size per day would be plenty to feed a falcon. And they don't even necessarily eat every day. They can eat more some days and can skip days without eating and be just fine. They do have Annie will need to eat more while she is developing the eggs. That is energy expensive, and they would also need to eat more frequently during migration. Although Grinnell and Annie are homebodies and they do not migrate themselves.
Lucky them.
Most other falcons do. So how much are Annie and Grinnell on the tower but off camera? Do we have other eyes on that? And we do. We have a really awesome group of people who keep an eye on the tower pretty regularly, who live in Berkeley or work on campus, and other local people. And
So especially during this kind of turbulent period where we weren't sure what was going on, it was amazing to have people on the ground keeping an eye on stuff, because there's a lot of the tower that is not covered by cameras. And frequently during the breeding season, Grinnell will perch like just out of range of the cameras. And people are all like, "Oh no, where's Grinnell? We don't see him anymore." And it's like, yeah, because he's like 5 feet off camera. Um, so there's just a ton of space on the tower where they can hide, and they often are on the tower. I'd say, I don't know, it's pretty frequent.
Yeah,
especially
they're
during the
very
breeding season.
regularly on tower, even when they're off camera. We do have also some of the awesome images that we post on social media of the birds from taken from below and not on our webcams are by a couple of our photographer friends, the very talented Bridget Ahern, who's at Moon Rabbit Rising on Instagram, and then John Davis. So they are two of the people who've been able to give us documentation from the ground, and that's been absolutely great to have them. All right.
So what was that an unusual number of floaters around before Annie disappeared? Seems like they were around before she left. Maybe she wasn't defending as vigorously. Yeah, it was a lot more birds than we usually see. We know that two of the birds that showed up, that we know there were 3 females that showed up for sure, maybe 4. 2 of them for sure showed up before the last time we saw Annie, but relatively briefly. But she might have been spooked by the number of floaters around, and to have another one come in after she left. That it just might have been evidence for that there was a lot of birds moving through. Part of that could be migration, spring migration. You could have birds flying north, looking for territories along the way, or just heading up to their territory and looking for places to rest along the way. And she just didn't want to deal with those birds. Or it could be that the Bay Area is kind of filling up with peregrines, and that the amount of competition that they have is really kind of a sign that their population is doing really well.
Yeah, and I'll do this one because this was asked twice, but I'm not sure if I have a great answer to it. But they've been observing kind of a high stepping behavior while Grinnell is walking after landing. Can we tell us what we know about that? And I know what you're talking about it when he's like walking across, both him and Annie, when they're walking across the ledge there, will kind of have that odd little run. But that's, I think, just the awkward gait that falcons have while they're walking, since they're definitely not an animal well designed for walking specifically.
Are peregrine falcons ever chipped and tracked? This is a great question. Yes, there's a couple of different tracking devices that fit on peregrine falcons, mostly kind of a backpack harness where you have a little device on their back and then it goes around their shoulders. There's been relatively little work on peregrine falcons just because they were so endangered for so long, and putting tracking devices on endangered species requires a lot of documentation, and most importantly, a good reason to do it. And for the most part, it's not like a life or death thing for the species. Like the scientific questions we can answer with tracked birds, it's really interesting and it's really cool data. But for the most part, it doesn't like kind of drive conservation and management. So sometimes those endangered species are less likely to be accepted.
Now I'm going to go and contradict you. There actually are a few pretty large scale studies that have taken place tracking peregrine falcons. But a lot of them with birds that nest in the far north and then have very long migrations in the south. And This information, actually, the tracking information, is pretty important for a few conservation contexts. One of which is just because conservation planning is all well and good if you do it around where a species breeds, but if they spend half of their year in a totally different part of the world, you do have to understand, that connectivity, what parts of the world are, tied together by these birds. And then, something that we'd really like to know about is where the young falcons go as they, initially move into the world and they fledge from the tower. And there's some ideas how to go about doing that. But that's a challenging study to put trackers onto young birds before they start dispersing, just because you don't want to put a tracker onto a bird that is not fully grown yet, that you're not certain, will fit the backpack in the future. But there's some ideas and some technology that might be used for that pretty soon. And so to go with this, is there any chance Annie will be banded in the future?
There's a small chance, but it's something that we don't really want to happen. And that is, if Annie is injured and gets taken to a wildlife rehab facility, she would be banded. That said, it's really, really hard to catch an adult peregrine that is not either migrating or migrating.
Yeah. There are ways you can catch an adult peregrine near a nest site if you have just the right conditions and just the right sort of place that you could try to strategically put a nest. The campanile is not a place that you could attempt to capture an adult bird and band them at. So
I have heard there was someone who was banding nestlings at a nest when the female came in to defend the nest, and he actually grabbed the female and banded her too.
Yes, and that one of the primary strategies that's essentially the instances where that can happen. Let's see. So this is a good question. Has there been any more drone activity lately? And there has been, unfortunately. I think there's been several days where drones have been seen, including the day that Annie came back. And we do kind of worry about that. We are a little worried that regular drone activity is one of the things that is making Annie feel more uncomfortable with the campanile as a nest site. We don't have any way to know that, but unfortunately there still has been drone activity. So hopefully everyone can help us out. If you know people who do like to go out and fly drones or take footage, to just make sure people are very mindful of where they are flying, if there's any sort of wildlife that might be disturbed by it. And also, campus itself does not permit drone flying without prior permission. So essentially, they don't permit people to fly drones on the campus. All right, so how close does a pair of falcons need to be to know that one or the other is present? And
I really like this question because there's a couple of ways a peregrine falcon can know that the other one is there. The first one is vocalization. And like Lynn said earlier, they're really loud. So they can hear each other from a long ways off. I mean, I don't know a number. Do you know a number?
I don't know a number, but I, as a human who is less attuned to it, can definitely hear them from... Occasionally, I could hear them from our apartment like a mile away.
Yeah.
So they can be very loud. There's that. And then, of course, falcons are known for the incredible eyesight. Their hunting strategy relies on being able to see birds from incredibly far away. And that, I know, they have a visual distance of something well over a mile.
Yeah.
In clear
they
conditions.
Could detect a bird their size Yeah,
So
well over a mile.
so they can see each other from a pretty long distance, assuming, weather conditions are good. So, that implies that wherever Annie was, she was pretty far away from the campanile, while Grinnell was starting to think she was gone and needed to move on. So if Annie did nest elsewhere, would the nest be used by that younger female who was interested in the spot recently?
I
And
think it's possible. It depends a little bit on if where the new nest that Annie would go for would be. If it's close to the campanile, she may continue to exclude birds from using it as part of her territory. But if she moves far enough, it certainly could become open game for another bird.
okay, and then this is, have we noticed any health issues with Annie? Could she have been injured, and is that why she might have been absent?
That was kind of one of the things that
That was the first hypothesis we had as to where Annie was prior to returning. And we've been looking pretty closely at Annie and how she looks and her behavior. There's no apparent sign of at least an outward injury.
Yeah, and really the two things we really look for are kind of limping or any favoring of a leg, or any favoring of a wing, and that's kind of the two main things you can pick up on, or anything with the head, where they're like holding their head weird, which can show a brain injury. But she's perched and walked and flown really well, so it doesn't appear that she was injured at all. That could have been an internal injury, or something, or just an illness. But
she appears to be healthy from everything we can see right now. So if this nest is going to be used by Annie, which we're hopeful about, what kind of activity and what sort of frequency should we expect to see on the webcams? Are they sticking around the house all day, morning, night? And so the answer is, as she gets closer and closer to being about to lay, she will be spending more and more time in and around the nest box. You pretty much know she's going to be about to lay when she starts being in the nest box overnight, but that's only really within a couple days of actually laying.
And we have noticed that she spends in the 3-4 days before she lays, she's on the tower a lot, almost all day, often perched, kind of napping, and that's one of the behaviors where it just takes a tremendous amount of energy to create eggs, so they just rest a lot while they're doing that.
Yeah, the behavior we really kind of are expecting to see before she gets ready to lay is Grinnell bringing her food items, which is something we have not seen yet this year. And we are also still seeing Annie often kind of very far away from the nest, apparently, still. So it's a little different behavior than previous years.
Could Annie have been watching to see if Grinnell is healthy and strong enough to be a worthy mate still? I think, every year, maybe constantly, Falcons are assessing the quality of their mate. So,
and again, that's part of this, Grinnell bringing prey items to Annie, these prey exchanges early on. It would be Grinnell demonstrating, that he's ready to raise a family, and so that he hasn't been doing it is part of, our hypothesis as to what might be going on with Annie. But again, it could be happening off camera, just a little bit higher up on the tower, and we maybe just haven't seen it.
And
to be fair, we have seen feathers falling from above on camera, so perhaps they may have selected a different place for prey exchanges.
And just a quick follow-up to this is, if Annie really didn't want Grinnell to be her mate, he wouldn't really have any say in that. She would pretty easily drive him off the territory. So she's at least tolerating him.
Oh, they've been expressing they've been doing the courtship displays with each other. She's doing more than tolerating him. How's Larry doing? Larry's still on Alcatraz. She successfully raised young last year. As far as I know, she's still with the same mate as before. I do not believe they've laid eggs yet.
No.
But they are in a relatively inaccessible portion of the island, so they don't get observed nearly as regularly as Annie and Grinnell would be, obviously.
Yeah. So we're hopeful that some of the biologists out on Alcatraz will be able to let us know in the coming weeks if Larry is actively nesting again. But it's a little bit hard to get that confirmation given where she nests.
Yeah. So this is a question that we get semi-frequently. Can Grinnell recognize if the younger bird is related? And if so, would he be uninterested in mating? And so we ourselves know that the young female wasn't one of theirs because all of Annie and Grinnell's offspring had been banded. That being said, just in general, would a falcon recognize a young bird or another bird as being related to them?
I think it's fairly likely. It's hard to say because it depends.
I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on how. Birds are really, really good at recognizing individual birds and individual anything. But what we don't know is if a bird that they raised in 1 year came back, would its characteristics still match enough of what Grinnell would remember that they would be able to recognize it? There's a pretty good chance, yes, but I honestly don't know the answer, and I don't know if anyone has been able to test that.
So we have caught mating on camera back in February. Do we think that mating might result in eggs that would be laid in the nearish future? And so birds are able to kind of store up sperm for a limited period of time before they will develop and fertilize the eggs. That being said, it might have been a little long ago for any eggs we see to be presumed to be from that instance. Falcons do just as part of the pair bonding will mate relatively frequently in the months prior to laying eggs. So that particular instance might not be it, but falcons, that's just typical of falcons to mate multiple times for not specifically fertilizing any eggs. So what's the chance this nest will be used this year?
I'm still pretty positive about it.
If we hadn't seen this kind of odd behavior from Annie, we'd say pretty confidently. And with Annie being back, I feel pretty optimistic that she would ultimately choose this site rather than some new site maybe she's eyeing. But we can't know for sure, but I feel pretty optimistic it will be Annie's choice ultimately, now that we've seen her in the nest box doing the scraping behavior, doing courtship behaviors with Grinnell again.
Yeah, I think the most likely scenario is that it may be delayed, just because it's been such a chaotic year so far. But I think we'll still have eggs.
All right. So if Annie's eggs were fertilized by another peregrine falcon, would she still lay eggs in this nest? And the answer is that is entirely possible. Many bird species, it is kind of their regular strategy to have what's called extra pair copulation, and will have some number of their eggs in any clutch be from different males. This is less common in a lot of the larger birds like falcons. It tends to be less common in species where the male does some amount of the incubation. But it's entirely possible that Annie might have one or two eggs that were fertilized from a different individual, if indeed that was one of the things she was doing. But we probably will not get the opportunity to find out. And this is a question that comes up a lot. And do the bells bother them? And after the years of watching them, we can say that the bells do not bug them. We can see that they notice the bells when they are ringing, but we have lots of video of one or the other or both of them essentially napping through the bell concerts.
One thing that I was really surprised by when we went up onto the tower is how quiet the bells are from that vantage point. And that's because the bell is, all the sound is directed down and out and doesn't go up through the kind of thick concrete floors. So there's really just not as much sound as you would think from that vantage point. And the other thing is that they chose the spot. So if it's too if it was too much for them, they just would have moved their nest location. So they seem to tolerate it. That, and the other one that people ask about a lot is the campanile lights, which are on at night, and that doesn't seem to bother them either.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of peregrine falcons that nest well north of the Arctic Circle, and so are nesting in
essentially full daylight all
the time. So that is something they're able to tolerate, and it may even help them defend their nest more effectively against owls. All right, so we mentioned that Annie's at least 8 years old. What is the expected lifespan? And, you know, in captivity, there's been individuals that have gotten up well into their 20s and I think into the 30s. In the wild, about 15 is a much more common age. It's a little hard to tell how old, you know, birds will get in the wild because it means you have to have a bird that was banded that you're able to watch for kind of a long time. But Annie is getting to be middle-aged, but is still at an age where we expect her to be pretty strong and pretty healthy for several more years at least. And so, do we think that Grinnell's accident a few months ago may have prompted Annie to seek another male or nest site as speculated? And this really is just, you know, going deep into speculation. And, you know, our speculation that maybe Annie's considering another nest site is, that itself is speculation. But I could see that, you know, having spent some time considering another male, she might, you know, it might have spurred her to have the thought of looking for another mate or nest site or investigating that. But
yeah, there's kind of any number of things that may have prompted this disappearance, and, you know, and we literally just have no idea why it happened. So it's all speculation, and there's just not much certain that we can say about what happened.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. We have there are peregrines on Mont Diablo. Do we study them as well? And the people that do the banding and the tracking of the birds all over the Bay Area is the Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research Group. And I believe that nest gets monitored semi-regularly as well. I believe they go up and band those chicks and take tissue samples, as they've been doing for a lot of their studies. So we do not personally study them, but the kind of group under the auspices that we work, I said that in the wrong order. But anyway, Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research Group is monitoring that nest among pretty much the large majority of the other Bay Area pairs. And then, so what are the California federal laws regarding drones near wildlife?
So, all birds in North America, or almost all, are federally protected, and disturbing them, especially near a nest site, is considered to be take. So that is illegal, and you can be fined or arrested for disturbing nesting birds. I don't know if there's specific California laws that also address it, but the campus also has a policy strictly on campus of not allowing drones to be flown.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been identifying often Grinnell and other falcons from below based on pictures that are provided to us. How good of a photo do we really need to identify the band?
I really like this question because it's surprisingly little in a lot of cases. It's a little bit harder with falcons because they all have a black band with white letters. But there's a lot of birds out there that have really colorful bands.
Yeah.
And so you can get a lot of information from just seeing the color of a band.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with the decision that the peregrine falcons banded in this region are all banded with black bands instead of varying colors of bands, but they're
someone had a theory about
yeah,
it.
I won't question people's ultimate decisions on that, but even so, the lettering on those black bands, the visual ID bands, are pretty large, and even from a relatively crappy picture, sometimes you can pick out what the letters are. Even being able to pick out 3 out of the 4 letters can often help you figure out which bird it is, because and there are just some combinations that aren't there.
And then I should add on top of that, if you report a band, you don't even get much of the combination, that at least alerts researchers that there's a bird that has a band in a location, and they can maybe go look and follow up and see if they can get a better look at it.
Yeah. So how loyal are they to a territory? If there's no competitor, will they live at the same place all their life? And they have really a high rate of what's known as territory fidelity. Specifically, a territory where they have nested successfully before. It's relatively common if a bird arrives at a place and attempts to nest and has relatively low success or doesn't manage to raise any offspring at all. They will very commonly leave a site like that, or if there's a season where they are unable to successfully raise young, that will sometimes trigger a bird leaving a territory. But if they are successfully raising offspring and there isn't anything actively creating stress on the bird that is new, they'll stay at the same territories all their life if they're able to. All right. How late in the season can the eggs be laid? And the answer is pretty late.
Yeah.
The Bay Area season is quite a bit.
It's a long
quite
season.
A bit earlier and quite a bit longer than a lot of other places.
The first Bay Area peregrine has already laid its eggs. Actually, maybe a week ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think birds can often re-nest if their first clutch fails. And so the PG&E birds that live on the PG&E tower in San Francisco had 2 attempts at nesting last year. And I think the second clutch was laid in May, maybe April.
Yeah, I don't really remember. I'd have to look to see what kind of the later dates that peregrine falcons have been seen breeding.
There's at least probably another 2 months ish.
Yeah.
That the birds could still lay eggs.
So, is it possible the pair bond started breaking down for some reason? Maybe because of Grinnell's illness. And just in general, falcons do need to continue to maintain their pair bond through time. They will continue to do the courtship behaviors in the nest box with each other. They still, the male still at the beginning of each season needs to be, actively bringing prey items to the female. So it is possible that Grinnell's illness did result in, a little bit of that eroding, and he might still need more time to kind of build up the, same level he was at with Annie in the past. That being said, again, the last 2 days we have seen the two of them in the nest box together, doing the courtship displays and head bows. So it seems like their pair bond is looking pretty good for the moment.
Yeah, really the only thing we feel like we're missing right now is the prey deliveries, and those could be happening kind of off camera.
All right, so dying to know your reaction when you saw Annie on cam. And so both of us that day were working from home.
Yeah.
And I was in here and you were in the other room, and I heard very sudden, "What the?" very loudly from the other room. So that was the reaction.
And then I had to like run in here with my laptop being like, I'm not hallucinating, am I?
Is this
like,
Annie? This is Annie, right?
Like,
yeah. So we carefully we're like, okay, so Annie has a slightly long bill. Yes. Okay. And Annie has the very dark face that goes down. Yep. Okay. It has that. Okay. Yep. It has the streaks here, but not here. Okay. Yep.
It was just unreal. Like,
yeah,
because I had given up like days before that. Like before we had announced anything, we were really worried. And so to have her show up was just astounding. Yeah.
All right. So I feel like this is a bird physiology question for you. Does Annie release the sperm at will when she wants to begin egg development? Can all birds store sperm?
I don't. The second part of the question, I don't know that all birds can. A lot of birds can. And I don't know, unfortunately, the physiology of how the sperm release and storage works. I know it happens. So unfortunately, I'd have to look up more information on that topic.
So we earlier mentioned Grinnell preying on water birds like coots. Is carrying a bird that large back to the campanile a problem? And so it is more common for the females to be hunting things like water birds, like the coots or ducks. It would be easier for Annie to do, but a coot is still within the size range that Grinnell would be able to fly with. They're pretty good at sort of orienting their prey item in a way that they are able to fly with. But yeah, it probably is a little bit awkward to see Grinnell with something that large going that far. Typically, he's not hunting things much bigger than pigeons. It's Annie who usually gets the larger prey items, but
and peregrine falcons can take prey that is too big for them to carry. I think the largest species that they've been known to kill are Canada geese and sandhill cranes, actually. And they definitely can't fly with those. So they sometimes will kill stuff that they have to eat where they kill it.
Yeah. So if Grinnell had been injured while Annie was sitting on eggs, would she be able to hatch them? And the answer is maybe, but with extreme difficulty, because it would require her to be hunting for herself and incubating eggs at the same time. And that's very difficult to maintain the eggs at the proper temperature if you have to get off of the eggs frequently enough to eat. It is possible. Because the birds that were at the PG&E building, they had an instance where the original male left and a new male had moved in while she was on eggs,
And the
but the new male
was,
didn't provide food, and she did all the hunting, and she ended up hatching one egg out of many. So it's possible, but it's very difficult for one falcon to attempt to raise chicks on their own, and I think it rarely would turn out well.
This is a good question. Any record of peregrines nesting on the campanile pre-DDT? So before DDT,
urban peregrines were essentially not a thing.
Yeah.
Before DDT.
They had Annie and Grinnell are the first, when we can say this definitively, the first peregrines to ever nest on the campanile. It was, and there's ornithologists on campus have made pretty good records of birds that have bred on campus and been on campus, and they know that birds have wintered there. Peregrines have wintered on the campanile, but this is the first time that they've bred here.
Yeah. All right. So, does this high number of floater peregrines pose a risk to Annie and Grinnell successfully raising young this year? On another cam, they were watching a new female displaced an old one.
It's definitely a risk, and I think this is something that we're going to always try to prepare everyone for the kind of inevitability that at some point Annie and or Grinnell, I mean, they eventually will both be replaced, but one of them at some point will be replaced. And that's kind of just the natural progression of how these nest sites work. And it's going to really suck to lose one of them. I mean, I was really, really sad when I thought Annie was gone. But I think it's a really good sign when we have replacements, because that means that the nest site is healthy, or it's a safe place, it's productive, and that the population is doing well.
Yeah, so it is some threat to raising young this year, because if one or the other, Annie or Grinnell, do get lost, this is kind of the worst season for it to happen. Single parent peregrines are rarely successful, as I mentioned. And so, yeah. And then here's one. So if Annie did have doubts about Grinnell, wouldn't it be more likely she'd push him out than look for a new territory? And for sure, that is what we'd expect. If Annie was not interested in Grinnell, she would completely attempt to chase him off. That's why, our hypothesis that maybe she has another family somewhere is just a hypothesis, just based on she's been observed from below going to just different places than she ever used to before. But
really, we're as at a loss as everyone else on what's going on. I think we got time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, we'll have to get off in just a second. And let's see. So is there any time we'd intervene to help our favorite couple? And so, as we've already seen, we did, people did end up intervening when Grinnell was found injured. And so the kinds of interventions, so we try our best to not intervene when it comes to just the natural things that are happening. If the chicks, they're struggling to, feed the chicks, we're not going to be able to go in and intervene with something like that. That's going to cause more harm than good. And stuff like that. And usually the policy is we don't intervene with things that happen for natural reasons. We only intervene in things where we believe that the problem is initially human caused. For example, we do intervene if the young birds fall onto the ground or into a building where they're at risk of being caught in a building or hit by a car or disturbed by people. Grinnell was kind of a weird situation because we did end up intervening in something that did turn out to be a natural event, that Grinnell had been injured by another falcon. But when Grinnell was initially brought to the wildlife rehab place, there was kind of no way of knowing what had happened. And because it was literally on like the side of the road near the Claremont Hotel or tennis court or wherever, intervention happened there. So
this is a bit of a really kind of sticky biological ethics question that is very difficult to answer, and we do put a lot of thought into it, and these are wild birds, and we want to provide everyone kind of a glimpse into a wild nest and natural nest habitat, an urban nest habitat, but these are birds that are acting naturally, and so it's not our place to kind of interfere that much with how it works.
All right, and I'm gonna kind of end off on this one just as because it gives me a final message. So how often are we watching the webcams? And the answer is a lot of us in kind of the Cal Falcons group. I just have my computer, one of my computers on. I have Cal Falcons webcams on in the background with the sound on. So if I hear something, I'll go in and see what's going on. But we also rely quite a bit on Cal Falcon viewers and social media and stuff for people to point out interesting things that they see happen. So I highly encourage any of you guys, if you see cool things happening on camera, feel free to, on our social media channels, tell us what time it happened and we can go back and see what's going on.
Yep, it's really appreciated, all your help in sending kind of highlights to our way.
Okay. Well, we all have to go. It's been a delight to answer people's questions. I'm sorry for any of the questions we weren't able to get to, but I'm so glad that this Q&A session was to celebrate Annie's return rather than to talk about what happened to.
Yeah. It's fun to have it be a celebration and not.
All right.
Yeah. Well, we'll see y'all later, and we'll probably do more of these.
Yep. Bye. Hopefully we get to see fuzzy chicks in the near future.
Yep.